Welcome to the Know Yourself Revolution, the podcast where we explore how understanding your unique design can transform every aspect of your life, including one of the most challenging and profound roles we can take on, which is caring for aging loved ones. I'm your host, Grace Gravestock, and today I'm joined by Grace Dakini for a heartfelt and insightful conversation about applying human design to caring for seniors, especially those with dementia. Grace Dakini is a former deconditioning coach, human rights advocate, coaching mentor, and educator who has dedicated her life to understanding human behavior and the impact of our psychology on well-being. With decades of experience in modalities like NLP, EMDR, total biology, and human design, she brings a deeply personal and transformative perspective to today's topic. In this episode, Grace is going to be sharing her journey of supporting her mother through dementia and how human design has played a crucial role in creating more aligned, positive, and effective caregiving interactions. She's going to reveal why honoring autonomy and decision-making, even in the face of cognitive decline, is essential, and how recognizing the unique energy blueprint of both caregivers and seniors can lead to more ease and compassion in the process. If you're navigating the challenges of caregiving or supporting a loved one through aging today, this episode is for you. So we have lots of Grace today in the room. Let's dive in. Thank you so much, Grace. I'm so excited to have this conversation. We have so much to talk about. And I know that when we started planning for this episode, we have been talking about you and your mother. And what was so interesting about the story that you started to share with me is how when you learned about your mother's design and you started really unpacking that changed the whole dynamic of caring for her. Before we dive in, Grace, do you want to set up this conversation?
Sure. The dynamic between my mom and I before tapping into her human design was very much oil and water. We did not get along. Like, I'm always on duty. I'm being the good daughter, but I'm living with a lot of the frustration. Even though I know my own human design, it was like we weren't functioning well together, and my energy would be drained. I could only give so much time to make sure she's safe and her needs are met. I couldn't show up for her as a daughter, only as a caregiver. My energy would be gone. It was depleted and frustrated. That's the first part. Learning that once she had the diagnosis, at first we didn't even have a diagnosis. So
what diagnosis?
She has a combination of dementia with Alzheimer's. Her brain is impacted. There are, with brain scans, they can see how it's impacted. And one part of the story that I want to share that we don't hear about is when somebody receives a diagnosis of memory loss, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, or a combination thereof, the one thing that's consistent that you're going to hear is that it's going to decline. They can't predict the rate of decline with these diseases. I guarantee it's going to decline. There is no prospect of it getting better. That has not been my mother's path. And my mother's memory loss has improved. She doesn't have the same memory loss that she had when she first was diagnosed. So this is where I'm like, I want to also make clear that I'm not going to give all the credit to human design. When my mother was first diagnosed, she was living independently. We can look at human design to show how her living alone without having access to other people's energy, she only has one motor. So my mother wanted to sleep a lot and had no drive. The type of motor she has is not a consistent, reliable energy motor like the sacral. So learning how our two energies work together and understanding that she is taking in my energy. So I need to make sure I've taken care of myself when I show up, that I have a full cup, because I actually say, I need to allow others to take from my saucer, not my cup. I need to make sure my cup is full and serving me, and that I have excess energy for those that are around me. And when I don't have that excess energy, then I'm not sharing my energy. I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself first. So that way, when
sorry, Grace, I just want to make the distinction. That's true of everyone. We
yes,
all get to fill our own cup first. That is the premise behind the Know Yourself Revolution, helping you know, love, and trust yourself first. It's important we are always pouring from a full cup. We've all been there when we're not, and it doesn't feel good. So no matter what your design, let's be clear, it's important for all of us to fill our cup first so that we are okay. And
yes.
so it's not okay anymore to be people pleasing. It's not okay to put other people's needs before our own. Then we're pouring from an empty cup. How long have you been taking care of your mom?
Since 2018, I was the primary caregiver. She moved back home in 2017. So it was between the 2017, 2018 that she got the diagnosis, but she was living in her own home. And there weren't the early signs. But as of 2018, then it was, every single day, part of her life. Yeah.
Wow. So this has been going on for about 8 years. You've been taking care of her. For people who are just joining us, I have a lot of friends in this situation. They're taking care of their parents. It's frustrating, painful, difficult to watch somebody you love disintegrate before your eyes. A person you knew or thought you knew, it feels like they're not even there. One of my friends and former coworkers had to go through this first with his dad and then with his mom too right now. And it's been going on for years, and it's very draining, I know, for him. And I know other people that have said the same thing. So you've been in this journey now for 8 years. Before we get into what that journey was like, could you just give us a little bit of background about what your relationship with your mom has been like over the course of your lifetime before this part of the journey started?
For myself, I would describe that the relationship was not a good or healthy relationship. I felt like I played the mother role. My mother, in her dynamic with me, was very narcissistic. She did what she wanted without ever thinking she has a child. Maybe the child needs to know where she is. I'm coming home from school. I don't know where she is. Is there going to be a supper tonight? She didn't have the typical nurturing qualities. I was the one always stepping up, being more responsible in the relationship. If you look at our charts, it plays out. We were both in our not self. We were not showing up authentically. We did not understand our decision process. So yeah, we did not get along. And I will, like, the thing that I don't like saying, but it is the truth, I loved my mother, but I didn't like my mother. That's how I would summarize a lifetime. I was just being the dutiful daughter, but from a sense of duty, not love. Things dramatically shifted when I've been on my human design journey for 5 years, practicing my strategy, my authority, and learning to live correctly for myself. After practicing, I started to understand my mom's chart. How can I help her honor herself? Once I was grounded in myself and my authority, I was able to learn hers and help her. She's my mom now. Even though she has memory loss, I'm her power of attorney. So there are things that come to me, but I don't have that heavy burden as a caregiver that I used to when she was living on her own. The uncertainty, confusion, and doubt, trying to figure out everything. I don't have that anymore because I don't need to make decisions that aren't being asked of me. Wait until you're asked for something. I don't have to anticipate for everything, right? And that's a big thing when you're taking care of somebody who has memory loss. You're always thinking about the what ifs. But if you there is a team effort,
Yeah.
working with different people. That was a big shift for me.
I want to highlight some things. In my system, we call it key signs. If you have your chart, run a chart for your parent right now, if you're listening, go to knowyourselfrevolution.com, or you can go to whatsmychart.com. Either way, you'll get there. And you can run a chart, and you'll find in my system, it'll show you the 4 most important things about your design. One of them is key signs. What you're highlighting, Grace, are key signs. The key signs to know whether you're on track being your true self or your not self. In traditional human design is a thing, it's your not self. It's the times when you're not being who you are meant to be. You're being the part of you that we call conditioned and programmed, which is, based on your interactions through life, people that have influenced you, usually your parents, loved ones, whoever. They usually leave an indelible mark on the way that you see yourself, and it influences. Their influence lives in your field as influencing you to be something, in many cases, that's not necessarily who you are. And so when you're operating from that place, we call it your not self. How you know if you're in your self or not self is your key sign. For 70% of us, it's satisfying.
Red flag is the frustration. For me,
70% of us, that is the red flag, frustration. They might call it frustration. In this system, we call it something different depending on your type. For people new to this and just listening, not self versus self. When you're not being who you're meant to be, you're frustrated. If you've lived your life in frustration, many people listening have, and I certainly did for many years. I mean, this was one of the big ahas that I had when I learned about my human design. Frustration isn't meant to be an address. It's like the bumps on the road, you hit them on the side to tell you to get back on the road. Like it's not a parking lot where you're supposed to park. So if your life looks like that, frustration all the time, then that means you're in your not self. Just want to make that clear before you go on. So thank you for bringing that up, Grace. A lot of people don't really understand that. And I think the point of bringing it to our attention today is to say that there is a better way. And that's what we're going to get to now. So when you talk about that, Grace, your human design experiment, you've been in the experiment for 5 years. I'll let you explain it. How do you understand that? The experiment that you've been in?
The experiment for me has been from moment to moment, not day to day. I'm a generator, so it's responding moment to moment. I'm not trying to force anything. I'm waiting for the life happening around me. I know I'm attracting what's right for me, so I don't have to chase it. I just had to slow down, listen, and wait. Okay, instead of processing from my mind, I just had to tap into where was my energy being literally pulled to? Like, what does this body want to do right now? So the initial phase, how I did it, I would do a brain dump, and it's like, oh, okay, just that to-do list, right? I got to remember all this stuff I have to do. So I worked with the conditioning of, okay, now I've dumped all this, so I don't have to busy myself trying to remember all these little details. I would ignore it after that. It's there if I need it. It's kind of like a safety net. My mind doesn't have to be busy thinking about it. Honestly, my life is transformed. I'm going from one joyful thing to the next. Every little thing I do throughout my day, I'm incredibly happy. One thing I failed to mention is I'm on the autistic spectrum.
Great.
So one of the conditioning is I had the belief that as an autistic person, having all these hypersensitivities, I'm going to live a life that's where I'm always self-regulating, that I'm always trying to not be in a state of overwhelm. But through this experiment, I can tell you that even as an autistic person with extreme sensitivity to like all the senses, sound, sight, atmosphere, pressure, I'm not in a constant state of overwhelm. I'm not having to constantly regulate myself because I am respecting this body's natural rhythm. That it's actually like I have gate 5 and It's in my incarnation cross. It's very important to me. My rhythm, and really learning how to honor my fixed rhythm while embracing the chaos of life without becoming destabilized, because life is uncertain, but I can still honor and respect that. It's completely shifted my life.
Wow,
So
that's really powerful. People listening right now that are especially on the spectrum, that's an issue, right? Trying
yeah,
to feeling like constant stress and pressure to regulate yourself and try to fit into a world that doesn't understand you, right? And
yeah.
the anxiety of wondering and like pre-planning of all the possible things that could happen and how to be ready for them. And it just drives you nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you are finding joy in every moment and that you finally have peace and not experiencing all these things, which are the things you're describing that are perhaps most people think of as unpleasant, are what I think you're saying is they're part of your not self. They're the part of you that you believed was you, but you realize now is not. When you honor who you are, you
Correct.
have a completely different experience with life. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Well, yes, but I'm still saying that I still have all these sensitivities. Those
Right? The
sensitivities
sensitivities don't go
haven't gone
away.
away.
No, the
But
sensitivities don't ever.
no, that's right. I'm no longer autistic. I still am. But those sensitivities serve me. It was a battle within my body. I never felt comfortable. I was
Mm.
constantly fighting everything inside myself. And I don't have that anymore.
Wow, that's really powerful, Grace. Could you talk about how you came to not have that problem anymore?
It is a level of dedication to following my strategy and authority. And yes, we talk about following our strategy and authority, but you need to start teaching others that I am no longer functioning the way you're used to me, how I used to function. So there is a lot about teaching others that I don't like to book things. Check with me. We can tentatively put stuff on my calendar, but on the day of, we're going to check in and see, does this still work? So I'm not breaking promises on people because I'm not feeling healthy. I don't have the energy, or something else comes up. So that's part of following your strategy and authority. But as you start behaving differently, you have to, some people you're going to lose because they want you to still show up the way you used to. I've had lots of relationships fall away, but it's not a bad thing, because now the circle of people that are around me are correct for me. So I have my connections with others has deepened. I have their friends, their support network, and we honor each other.
That's beautiful. The key I want to highlight is that you started honoring your actual design instead of who you thought you were. And so the reason you and I connected is because we're both studying human design, right? This was my experience too. I was so frustrated with my life and what I thought was true. When I found out that everything just about that I thought was true about my life was not actually true, it really shocked me. So you've had a pivotal experience with this tool. So I want to just point out, if you are listening for the first time and you've never looked at your blueprint, get your free chart at what'smychart.com. So let's talk more about your journey and your experience with your mom, Grace. I want to make sure we have time to unpack that. Connecting the dots from what you said and where we're going. I know you've been on this journey of understanding your design for 5 years. In that process, you started looking at your mom's design. 8 years ago, she got diagnosed and you began that caregiving journey, right? That's been going on now. And she has since lost a lot of her memories. And she has the label of dementia. And a lot of people listening are going to be able to relate to that because so many people are going through this. I think, if I understand correctly, as you were learning about yourself, you started learning about your mom and her design. We're going to look at it in a minute. As you were learning about it, that shifted your experience, not just with yourself and with her, but the way that you understood your mom. Is that true?
I've been her caregiver for about 8 years, but I really started to dive deep into her body graph in the last 3 years. It's not just how I interact with her, but I've been coaching caregivers around her to respond to her and respect her energy type and authority. I've been teaching them the right way to speak with her, so it's not just me, because I'm not with her 24/7. So it's everybody. We're all working on the same way on how to speak with my mom. 8 years ago, within 30 seconds, we were on a feedback loop. She would ask the same question over and over. I could finish telling her, and she'd ask the same question. And so, yeah, that would have been one of my old triggers that I don't like. I'm a person that's very detail oriented, and now I have to repeat my details, and it just would frustrate me. So that was one of the things where I shifted, and it didn't affect me. Now I can read her a book, and when we pick it up later, I can say, so what do you remember? And she remembers. That would have been impossible 8 years ago.
Wow.
It's significant.
So you're saying her memory has improved, even though
Yeah,
that's very unusual. People would never tell you that.
exactly.
So what do you attribute that to?
When we first started with a 35-piece puzzle, it would have taken her an hour with a lot of prompting and, like, what are we looking for, and helping her an hour to complete that 35-piece puzzle. And now she can complete the puzzle in 15 minutes on her own.
Wow.
So, I mean, sorry, my little ones, my doggy's moving here. So this is what I'm saying, is that I'm seeing a completely different woman. I know that she's still deconditioning, like, for her childhood trauma as a manifester. She has a strong will and was punished for that. So she's always worried about getting into trouble for just wanting to do what she wants to do. That's one of the things I can educate them on: childhood trauma conditioning. She needs reassurance. We want to stimulate her will. She's got the money line defined. So she needs to make her decisions when it comes to the material things. What is she going to wear today? So a lot of people, when they're living with, taking care of somebody with dementia, it's like they start treating them like children, that they can't make these decisions anymore. But how do you know yourself? You know yourself by the decisions you make.
That's a key.
You're not allowed to make the decision. She's lost so much. Her home, her independence for driving. I'm happy that where she is, we are allowed to decorate the room like a home. So her home is filled, like, again, that's another thing that, my brother's not understanding my mom's human design. My mom is very grounded by her possessions. So everything in her room says, that's who I am. Everything has a story for her. So having all these possessions for her reminds her of who she is. So allowing her to talk about all her possessions, it fills her with happiness. So not taking that away from her. So yeah, so back to the decisions is when she is deciding what she wears, deciding what she eats, when she eats. These are things, making the changes. I'm advocating, helping to teach them. I understand you're running a home, trying to make sure everybody gets their bath, meals. My mother's the grazer. She doesn't want to sit down at a scheduled time. We went through a rough year with her health. She was in the hospital for 6 months, and it was a digestion problem. But her will was not being respected. And this is where I'm like, for her to have good health, you have to let her eat what she wants when she wants. Yeah, but they're
Seeing
kind
her.
of changing it.
Oh,
They,
really?
I've got a fridge in her room now so she can help herself. There's a lot of advocacy and teaching, but you have to respect the individual.
Human design is the science of differentiation. And
Correct.
the reason that it's that was given to humanity, what, about 30 years ago, was because we're in a time that needs it. We've come from the last 450 years, sameness. We've all felt shoved into a box. And where we're moving to, according to the 2027 prophecy, is the cross of Sleeping Phoenix, which happens to be my cross. And the energy of that is about differentiation. We all get to be individuals, unique, and that gets to be celebrated instead of reviled, instead of being martyred for being different, like many of us feel we have been over our lives, maybe until now. The future is about differentiation. So that's why it is time to remember who we are, to know who we really are, so that we can let go of all the things that we're not. Why? So that we can finally have joy and peace and all the good things in life. This is a game changer, Grace, that you are looking at your mom's design and realizing so many important things about her. I want to share her chart. And I know a lot of people are not going to be able to understand this. And that's okay if you're watching this and you don't understand what we're looking at. The point isn't for you to necessarily understand everything, because it's a lot. I mean, this system combines 7 systems: Eastern, Western, and Vedic astrology, the Chinese I Ching, Judaic Kabbalah, quantum physics, and the Hindu Brahman chakra system. So it's a lot. I don't expect anyone else to understand, but I want to say and show it here. Grace, you mentioned your mom is what we call a manifestor type. In our system, we call it initiator. What's different about the way I talk about human design is after 9 years, people have always told me, I just don't have time to learn a new language. The language around traditional human design is very complicated. I like to keep it simple. Your mom would be called a manifestor, but people get confused. They get frustrated about that because they think, oh, if I'm not a manifestor, then that means I can't manifest. No, we all can manifest. It's just the words that traditional human design uses, the word that they use to reference this particular configuration that we're looking at right now. So this is Carol. And one of the things that's interesting that you said, Grace, about your mom is that she likes to talk about herself. Everything has a story. And so what's unique about a person with this configuration is that this green blob is called the Will Center or Resource Center. She has access to resources consistently. Grace, you and I were talking about how she has the money line.
There's her right now.
How about this?
There we go. Now I see it.
Yeah. I was on the wrong screen. This is her resource center. This is the money line. Before you look at your chart and get freaked out, like, oh no, I don't have any money. I don't have the money line. It's not about that. A lot of people think that. But the reason I mention it is to say she has the consistent energy for access to her resources. This represents the resources and the game, being a human. And this is actually what really is underneath every human relationship to some extent, I believe, or most, I'll say maybe most relationships. But the game is to get energy from one of these motors. These 4 blobs here are motors, different types of motors. The throat is the center for manifestation. And the whole point is just that she does not need anyone else to get the energy from the motor to the throat, because she has it all the time. It's consistent. If you don't have a consistent colored line between one of these motors and your throat, that it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you're not going to have money or resources. It just means that your path to getting them is different than somebody who has her configuration. Her configuration gives her quick access, right? And so when you talked about her wanting, everything has a story, and she needs to be able to tell that story. This is the configuration of somebody who has this particular line from here to here. She is going to be needing to tell stories about herself as her way of expression in the world. She is here to speak about her resources, her value in the world, her worth. And she does that through stories. So I'm going to pause. Is there anything you want to say, Grace?
Well, this is beautiful because now she is fulfilling her legacy with my assistance. We are writing a mini series for people who have memory loss, because This was one of the things she's expressed, is that she's always had a passion for reading, but having this kind of disease, they cannot read a standard book that's linear like this. It's too tiring. She loves me reading to her, but she misses the independence of reading on her own. We came up with the idea of writing a series of books with images, pictures to tell a story. It's not a child's book. It will be a picture book with words. There will be dialogue. There will be some writing in it, but it'll be structured in a way that, well, I've already done some tests with different people with memory loss, that they can read it. It will be content for people with memory loss. It's their story, their issues, to express themselves and help family members, caregivers, recognize their struggles, their story, to see the person and not just the disease. I have the newsletter called Remember Me on Substack. It is a tribute to her and the things that I've learned as a caregiver that can help other caregivers. But really, most of the articles are her story. I do the writing, but it's her story. I'm really excited. We drafted 5 books. So we know it's a series that we have, but it's taken me a year to find somebody to help me illustrate the book. And now I have somebody that's helping me illustrate the book. And I'm hoping it's a slow process, but I'm hoping to have at least the first book out come Christmas of this year. So, but
Wow.
so it's her telling, and it's so fascinating. She asks when where are we in our book? How are we doing? And so like, it is a true, genuine collaboration. Her wisdom is coming out as well. A lifetime of wisdom is finally being expressed. I share the ideas, my concept, and she can tweak it. For me, it's like, and she'll recall, oh, well, something from her childhood, and it plays well into the story. It's a nonfiction book, loosely based on her story. It's not a fiction. It is nonfiction, because we take the truth and make it work for stories.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Grace. And I want to point out to people that are unfamiliar with human design. So when Grace said she gets to live her legacy, she's got a lot of wisdom. Wisdom is code for people in human design. All the white in your chart means you get to have a lot of wisdom. You're here to become wise about things, like lots of things. What things? Well, there's codes, and there's a lot here that we could go into, which we're not going to go to now. But the reason I'm showing the chart on the screen right now is to show you how much white is in her chart. And that white tells you how much wisdom she is here to gather. It means she's going to have a lot of variability of experiences around at least the areas that are white, and they represent the areas of life. So this is around inspiration. She's going to attract this different mirrors in her energy field, and she's going to attract people that teach her about these things. This is inspiration. This is about her identity.
Cursor again, it's showing.
Thank you. I have 2 screens. So this is about her. She's gained a lot of wisdom around inspiration, right? And she's intending to be an inspiration to others through this book. This is an expression of her wisdom that she's gathered through her life. What other kind of wisdom is she here to have? Well, she's going to have wisdom around her identity and stories about people she's allowed into her life, close to her, that have affected her deeply, because this is your identity center. And so just like me, this is white. And so it means that those of us who have this white are going to have a lot of wisdom around our identity. And so we're going to bring different people into our lives so that we can taste the energy of different, what does it mean to be a different, how a person shows up in the world, a different identity, so that ultimately she can develop wisdom and choose how she wants to show up in the world. And that's why you were saying, Grace, I believe, why it's so important that you allow her to choose her own clothes, have her own room that represents who she is, because that's an expression of wisdom around identity, right? And then she's got this motor to the throat, and this one white means she's here to learn about wisdom around life force energy and how to use it. Sexual energy, life force energy, that's what this one's about. She's got wisdom around fear and intuition. She's got wisdom around divine timing. Whoops, my cursor, I keep going to the wrong place. And so this is divine timing,
Yep.
life force energy. This fear is intuition, emotions, and passion. She's an empath. So the point is highlighting what you're saying, Grace, about your mom, Carol, which is she is finally being able to share the wisdom that she has gathered from a lifetime of experiences by looking at all the white in her chart, that she is here to become wise around about all these things. And now she gets to have that as an expression.
Yeah. If you keep that there for a second, Grace, keep that for a second, because her life force energy, those channels connecting, both have one segment in blue, one in red. So even though it's fully defined, she's not fully aware of her life force. She doesn't fully identify with her will. She doesn't fully identify with that wisdom that she has, because part of it is that knowing in the body, not from the mind. This is something I find very interesting, and I'd like to highlight for people who are caregivers or somebody with memory loss. There is a grace to memory loss when you can tap into respecting the person's individuality, like I have with my mom. I've been going through this deconditioning process for 5 years, and it's a dedication every day to follow my life force, my energy, my strategy and authority. With my mom, I've only, like I say, I know for sure 2 years. It might be a little longer than 2 years, but it's like all that conditioning is falling away. With memory loss, we attach ourselves to stories and say, this is who I am. This is one of the things that's really scary for people who are taking care of their loved ones, because they see this falling away of a person that this is who we think they should be. But what if they're losing the conditioning and there's an opportunity to connect with the real person? That's what I see with my mom. I am connecting with who she was always meant to be. And she is a lovely woman. I am so enjoying getting to know her, and she's able to let go. It was a hard life. Those are hard lessons. And now she's expressing wisdom without the hurt. It is a genuine inspirational wisdom she's sharing. The words, I mean, the things that she'll come out of her mouth, it opens me up. Like I just have, like, it's just so incredibly beautiful and wise. I'm always astonished. I need to remember that and write it down, because it's going to wind up being in one of our books. It's really a beautiful thing. It doesn't have to be so sad and traumatic if we're willing to see the person behind the disease.
What I hear you saying, Grace, is that a lot of people, when they see their parents or somebody they love going through memory loss, they feel so much grief, sadness, and so much anger and frustration, because maybe the parent doesn't remember them anymore, and so they feel like the person that they've loved is gone, and they're just filling a role, or they're just there out of obligation. Saying there is another lens to look at this through, and when you look through this other lens, you get a completely different experience, which is so much more positive and so much more joyful. And what I hear you saying is that when you look at your mom, recognizing what's falling away from her, some might look at it and think she's losing her memories. What she's actually losing is the conditioning and programming that kept her in a not self state. It kept her in a state that was not her, which is probably why she had so much pain and trauma, right? And she wasn't being a woman at the time when she was, because she's older than us. So at that time, to be a woman who is meant to initiate, that was not socially acceptable. Correct. So the fact that she was trying to be herself in a world that did not support her. All the layers of, I think of them as scales that kind of grew over the wounding that she had all those years became what people might have thought of as her, right? But what's actually her is the beautiful, wise woman underneath. And so as she's losing her memories, she's losing all those scales that were not her in the first place.
Correct.
If you are going through this journey with your parent or somebody you love, and you have been just absolutely devastated by the fact that they don't remember, I want to speak into the possibility that if you can look at it through a different lens, maybe this person is letting go of things that were never theirs in the first place. They might have been forced on them. They began to take it on as theirs. It wasn't, and they became somebody they weren't meant to be. That caused them a lot of pain. If you're taking care of somebody you love, you probably want the best for them. If you can look through this lens, it's very possible the person you're seeing, to you about your mom, Grace, I'm talking to you, the person who's listening, thinking about their parent or a person they love, grieving over who they used to be. What if you could celebrate that maybe they're coming into who they really are? And maybe for the first time, they're able to experience life without all that icky scaffolding. I had another guest, Laura Foster, and she calls it scaffolding. She has a program called Holistic Scaffolding. She helps you get rid of it for free. There's a lot of people seeing this right now, and it's timely. We're having this conversation. If you're going through grief around your parent or loved one because of their memory loss, please consider this. Grace, what else can you say to that person right now in that situation?
I had the opportunity to volunteer in long-term care homes, and I taught pottery to people that had dementia. Some of them were blind, but I want to speak more about the people who had the memory loss. So that prepared me for my mom. I wasn't stuck in my head with all these people I did volunteering for that, who were they before? I didn't have any of those attachments. So I really got to interact with these people who have memory loss as individuals. And again, because there's memory loss, we think there's less than a person there, that they can't make decisions. And they can. And it's a beautiful thing when you tap into the person. And like, the people couldn't believe, like they think when I talk about pottery, well, it must have been, kindergartners and this mucky mess. No, they created beautiful art. I didn't have that attachment to who I thought they were. In the home my mom is, quite a few of that, and I know them all by name. And I interact with them. My interactions with them are deep because I'm seeing the individual, not the disease. I do see the loved ones come in, the hurt and suffering on their face because they're not seeing the individual. The first time I went to an Alzheimer's meeting, I was handed for a pamphlet basically of grieving for your loved one while they're still alive. You do feel like they're dying, but they're still living. And that's actually, for me, one of the conversations I want to shift is that they're not dead. Right. There is a real human being there. You're seeing more of their real spirit. I have a different way of seeing memory loss.
I think that's really important to share right now, Grace. As we wrap up, you can join Grace in breaking the stigma around mental health. gracedakini.substack.com is where you'll find it. And there's a lot of information there. There's a lot of stories, right?
Yes.
So what else will people find there, Grace?
I publish a weekly article on different aspects of mental health. It's always a personal story. I have lots of experience on mental health as a coach, but my writing style is not to impose my authority or say I'm an expert. I share deeply personal stories to inspire people to reflect, find their own authority, and shed the hurt self we identify with so they can live a joyful life like I am.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's what everybody wants, isn't it? We all want to have joy. We all want to to be ourselves. And we're coming into a time celebrating everyone being who they really are. And that's exciting to know we're creating it now. This has been a pivotal conversation. Grace, you've helped us to shift the narrative around aging seniors, around dementia, around how do we look at them. It's certainly not that they're dying or there's anything wrong with them. Like, what if they're actually shedding the layers that are revealing who they really are? That's a completely different mindset. I have loved ones that are older, and that's very encouraging to think about. Before we started, you and I were talking about a new project called the Death Blueprint. I'll be sharing more about that later on a different broadcast. This topic is really timely. So many people need to hear this message right now. There's so many people who are losing loved ones, who are not even just losing, but they feel like they're losing them because their memory has gone. And so that's why this important conversation today about dementia and listening to the possibility that they're actually becoming more of who they are. Is there any last words you have, Grace, for our listeners who are concerned about this and how they can apply it to their lives? Maybe one tip that's helped you in looking at your mom in a different way.
I don't know if I have. That's a big question. Just try and have a new perspective. It's getting out of our heads. We are so stuck in our heads. My very first article is Stop Making Decisions with Your Mind. That is our nemesis. Open your mind to different perspectives. You don't have to go down the human design path to knowing who you are. I encourage it because I've gotten rid of my PTSD. I live happily with my autism. We had a very stressful year last year. If I weren't following my human design, I don't know if I would have been able to be there for my mom last year. I think it's the best tool out there, in my opinion, but I'm not going to force anyone. I write my articles so everybody can understand them. And then at the very end, I put down the little what parts of it help through understanding human design. You don't have to invest in knowing human design. It's self-exploration. When I write about mental health, it's to inspire self-exploration.
So if you want to learn more about Grace's work, join her in breaking the stigma around mental health at gracedakini.substack.com. If you'd like to look at your chart, I offer a free one at whatsmychart.com. This will give you a free report that highlights the 4 most important things that I think everyone should know, and it includes what Grace has referred to as strategy and authority. I have recategorized that as decision-making strategy. So It's all in one. It's easy to understand. You don't have to learn the jargon. You just need to look at the words and say, am I doing this? It's very simple. And as you said, Grace, that really changed your life. I know it changed my life. This is a new idea for me to use the human design of the person you love to look at their journey with Alzheimer's or dementia or aging as a journey towards remembering who they really are and letting go of all the crud and scales that have built up over the years. And when we look at it like that, we can celebrate this new version of this person that we love instead of be sad about it. And that's a hashtag new ways of living, working, and being. I love it. So it's a great place to end. Thank you so much for being here, Grace. I appreciate you. I'm glad we could have this conversation, and maybe we might have more in the future.